You're listening to Stellar Success, Leveling Up for Medical Pros with Dr. Tudor Francu. Join us as we explore how medical professionals can achieve stellar success in all areas of life. It's time to level up.
How are you, Dr. Patel?
Fantastic. How are you?
Good, good. I want to give the audience a little bit of an overview of your career. Can you start with your beginnings and tell us where you are now?
Oh man, yeah. So I'm a dentist. I went to dental school out in San Antonio from 2010 to 2014. I've been practicing dentistry ever since. Um, we opened our first office in 2016. So I worked for a year at a different group out in Dallas, and then me and my partner realized we just wanted to be able to have our own thing, and we set out to open our first practice, and we did that in 2016 here in Austin off South Lamar. Like we were in our mid to late 20s, and the practice was going really well. And, you kind of get to that point where like, well, what's next? You're very growth minded, then, it just becomes a natural thing for you to be like, well, let's see how we can grow this thing. So, we've been growing and adding practices, and now we're at 10 locations across the Austin area. We actually have one location in Dallas as well. Um, and that's kind of the short version of that story. My
Yeah.
role is chief dental officer in the practice. I love dentistry, so I spend a lot of time with the docs and mentoring them, helping them through things that they've been struggling with. And it's just nice to have somebody who can kind of understand your perspective when it comes to dealing with the day in and day out of patient care.
You mentioned we started. Who's we?
Oh yeah, me and my business partner, Dr. Hardy Chodavadia. He's my partner in all this.
So did you start with him from the beginning, all
Yeah,
this
yeah, we did. We
enterprise?
started the first
How
office
did you
together.
guys know each other?
We went to dental school together.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
so we were
are you
classmates.
in the same area? Do you live close by with one another
Yeah, like
or
20 minutes away. Yeah, he's got three kids, so he's out in the suburbs.
okay.
I live in the city. But it's just, but yeah, I mean, we're so close friends.
Yeah.
His wife and I actually went to college together, so I can't get rid of the guy if I wanted to.
Very nice, very nice. So bring us back a little bit of how you started this the office. You know, most of the dentist entrepreneurs, they start their own office, right? One. And I know it's hard anyway to do that. At what point you realize that you want to grow and open up more locations?
Honestly, that's probably like an even younger me question. So when I was growing up, I lived on my parents' motel. I learned what overhead was before I had hobbies. So like the business thing was always just ingrained in me, and I always knew I wanted to be on the business side of things, right? That was always kind of the direction that I wanted to go. But luckily, like I enjoy the patient care side of it as well. So, for a long time, I've known that that's what I wanted to do. I didn't always know it was going to be dentistry, but I always knew that this was the direction that I would go. But like I said, when we first opened our first practice, like plenty of challenges, just like anybody opening a business. And I remember there was a day where the assistant just decided not to show up, and my front office person had a family emergency, so she had to drive down to Houston. So I was the only person in the practice, and I was verifying insurance, answering phones, presenting treatment plans, doing cleanings, collecting money, like like every single thing that you could possibly do in the dental office. I did by myself that day, right? Because we had four patients lined up for that day, and I was like, I'm not going to cancel these patients. We need to be able to like see them. Um, so that was like a good learning experience.
Yeah.
It does
You
two things. It teaches you like empathy, because like how like when you think about insurance verification, it seems very simplistic, but then you actually call somebody and wait on hold for 20 minutes, and they're reluctant to give you information, and those are all perspectives you wouldn't have unless you actually like did it yourself. So I think it was a very valuable experience. And we hit a lot of tailwinds, to be honest. Like, I think to be able to be successful, there's some level of luck and the things that go on happen for you. And we were in a growing town in a really nice neighborhood that we were able to land this location, and that really propelled the success.
You mentioned your family history of like growing up in a business environment. Can you give us a little bit of like specifics, detail for that? What did that
Yeah,
mean for
yeah. It
you?
wasn't anything crazy. My parents, they owned and operated a small 30-room motel out in Kansas, and we lived on the motel. So like, from a very young age, like just I understood like inventory. I had to, like, hey, there are things I got to get done because this is your everything here is yours. You're not working for anybody else, right? So like, learn accountability from a very young age, and how to deal with customers, and just like patient, like just customer care in general, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
somebody comes in and you got to be able to be hospitable to rent them a room, and hopefully they have a good stay and they come back, or they tell their friends to come back. And how is dentistry any different? Like, I hope they have a good experience, they like their cleaning, they come back and they send their friends and families. It's the same thing.
Yeah, this is a theme that comes back very often of people that are growing up in a business environment in their families, and they're used to that kind of mentality and mindset of having their own property taken care of, service the customers, whatever the type of clients they are, and they carry that forward to their own lives. Now, the interesting part of this is that most of the dentists and medical professionals, doctors in general, they come out of school and they have no clue what business is and what they should do, because by definition, a doctor needs to practice in a private enterprise, either be in a hospital or an office or a surgical center. But we don't, most of them have no idea how to start and what to do in that. With your experience and your background from your family and from your enterprise, what would be some three things that you would advise someone out of school, medical school or dentistry school, to learn and to do to be a good entrepreneur?
Well, number one, set goals. You got to understand what you want 1, 3, and 5 years out. And based on the goals that you've set for yourself, seek mentorship. There are people out there that have done it, and like, I like, if somebody comes to me asking for help or advice on things, I'm open to it, just because people are willing to do that for me, right? So I think it's a good thing to prioritize. So if you set goals and you have some mentorship, and then the third thing is, and I think this is like a building emotional resiliency. I think with business is a lot of ups and downs, and it's you can't get too high when things are good, and you can't get too low when things are bad. And that comes with a little bit of experience and repetitions and going through it and that kind of thing. It's exhilarating, but if you can manage to just control your emotions, seek the right kind of people to help you, and know what you want, that's a good foundation for figuring out what you want in life.
Yeah, another thing is it's particularly um, different in dentistry because I'm thinking, you guys, you have a I would say a lucky specialty in a way. You don't have to take insurance, and that's very different from any other specialties or offices. And that brings the question of how you navigate financially running an office like that with either cash payments or payment plans and stuff like that, that brings you to be successful in one way and also efficient and financially sound in a different way. How do you manage this?
So, to kind of repeat that point, yes, we can like not take insurance, and that's definitely like a possibility for us. But in general, it also depends on the demographics of like where you're practicing, right? Our locations are all, in Austin, where it's a bunch of young professionals who have dental insurance, and they're not necessarily going to have a bunch of like, disposable income or that kind of thing. So they want to be able to utilize their insurance, right? It's also kind of you just want to make sure that like you're kind of setting yourself up for success based on what you want and what it is that seems to fit you, right? So, I think, and to answer your question, it's really about understanding your customer too, right? Like, what is the avatar of the person walking into your business? And I think it's important. And one thing I love, the thing I think is the biggest advantage in dentistry is that no one tells me how long I can spend with my patients. So I can be in there for as long as I want to. I get to control that to some degree. Obviously, there's within reason, but when I talk to my patients, I tend to understand certain trends. Where are they coming from? What kind of profession are they in? How did they hear about us? I'll ask them these types of questions just so that like it gives me a lot of information about everything else going on around me, right? How was your experience? And all those things, and asking for reviews, and those are all really powerful things that you can utilize in our world to help drive some success for you, as well as some predictability and efficacy in the things you're doing from a marketing standpoint too.
Yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit about scaling the business model from one to multiple offices. And this is one thing that, um, you know, it, not too many people are in a position to do that for different reasons. But in your case, what do you think is the most important thing that you did to be able to scale, from one to three to four to 10? Is that a specific recipe you have?
Um, I think the I think there's a guardrails, but I don't necessarily want to say that there's a specific recipe. I think like number one, you got to set up some systems, and which earlier on we didn't. So when we went to one to three, it was massive chaos, right? And like and again, there's like I said, there's only so much you can like read in a book and that kind of thing to figure this out. But until you really understand that, until you've set up some like clearly defined systems for every single piece of the business, like it's going to be hard to scale, because you're also like, not only are you going to scale the things that you're good at, you're also going to scale the things that you're bad at. So unless and that leads to my second point, which is hiring the right people, like especially in like leadership positions that share the right values, right? Like, and you can teach anybody like skills. That's not the real like difficult part. The difficult part is like somebody wanting it and caring, right? That's where it really moves the needle for you. So I think if you're good at putting together systems, and if you're not, maybe putting somebody have ownership of the fact that you need to put those systems together, and incentivizing them to do it a certain way. I think if you do those two things, it'll really help you on the scaling journeys. Find the right people, systemize things.
Um, when when you are young and you are a dentist practicing physician and you're building your office and you want to scale to multiple offices, you only have 24 hours in a day, like everybody else. What's your strategy to make that the most efficient of your time?
Um, what we did was like earlier on, like we were practicing full time, and both of us, and trying to run the business. And again, that's where the whole chaos in the business came from, is that we didn't necessarily give enough attention to the business side of it early on, right? And so then it became a point of emphasis to be like, okay, like he would work a week, then I would work the next week, and then the weeks that we were off, we'd be like working on the business, right? So each of us had our things that we would focus on, and that's how. And it helps to have a partner, honestly, and especially someone who like we have very complementary skills to each other, and which works out really well, because we're not as like stepping on each other's toes as much, right? Which is always kind of something you think about when you're running a business. And that it's never a perfect game, but I think in general, if you're able to have complementary skill sets, then you can really just be like, this is my priority, this is your priority, and then grow from there. So once we slowly started pulling away from the chair, that's when things started to get a little more organized, and we focus on the culture a lot too. I think like that's such an important piece of it all, is that like you're not going to be able to see every patient that walks through the door, but your team is. So your team has to basically embody the things that you want them um to display, because you want them to feel like every patient that is seen is being seen by you, right? Which is a hard thing to pull off, but as close as you can get to that. And that's one thing I'd say I'm like very proud of that. I think the work that gets done in our clinics is something you can hang your hat on. I'm really, really happy about that.
That's awesome. Um, I'm I'm curious because one of the traits of a successful professional in our field is the fact that multiple times we have to deal with failures and setbacks and things that don't go very well. And I'm sure every one of us had such moments in their lives. Can you give us an example for you?
Oh man. Where do I start? There's plenty. I think if anybody tells you that they got that far in life without things not going well, for me, like like personally, I dealt with like my mom and dad both like went through a lot of health complications of passing away like while in the middle of growing all this. So that was like a real low point for me. But work to some degree kind of became the crutch that I leaned on for dealing with that. Um, but like if we're just talking about within the business itself, I thought COVID was a huge challenge, right? Like
Hmm.
dealing with the shutdown and just like the limitations that you had and the access to supplies, and then half the workforce just not coming back, and what hiring looked like after that. Like I think that whole 2020 2021 like time period was like it just felt like the mountain was a lot higher to climb than it was before that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a tough time for a lot of people. And one of the weirdest thing that happened, which I don't really have an explanation, really a good one for this, is like what you mentioned, the fact that people didn't want to come back to work. They didn't want to work
Yeah.
anymore. Their life perspective completely changed after that pandemic. And it's a thing that happened all over the world. And everybody was in every specialty was wondering, what's going to happen now because we don't have people to work anymore. How did you deal with that specific challenge? I mean, I know in my specialty it was a big hit, but what about you guys?
Oh man, I mean, you got had to get creative, learning how to incentivize the teams a certain way to to just to get a little bit more buy-in with the things that were going on. And again, the culture component, if people like you and they feel like you value them, you listen to them, that's going to create more retention. And one of the big things we found during that time period was that training was going to be the biggest thing that we like had to optimize for, because if you can train people, you can bring on inexperienced people and actually like have them get to a point where they're functional, right? So that's when like training became a huge emphasis for us. And that's always a work in progress, right? Because I think as you're all evolving, as technology is changing, now the AI has become a more bigger part of everything that we're doing. um the training becomes ongoing training for everybody, right? So that's definitely been a focus for us since that time period, because I was like, look, what's the strategy here? Are you going to be able to go and find a bunch of experienced people to hire? Probably not. Maybe you might get a couple of them, but like, you want to hang on to them, and incentivize them to help you grow the business, and help you train others to basically be able to function in the things that you're doing. So that was definitely like in my mind the biggest thing that changed was like training became a real priority.
Hmm. Yeah, I was about to ask you, you're still practicing right now, and you also deal with the business side of it. When you don't do those two things, what do you do? How do you occupy your time?
Yeah,
How
I
do you
mean,
take care of yourself?
yeah, that's very important. I work out. I go play sand volleyball with some friends. I still play basketball, which has been great. I like to run, so I'll go out and run up. I could play with my dog, which is always great. tons of friends. I'm a big football nerd, so I'll go to bars and hang out with my friends and watch football games together. And so, I have try to have a good balance of like social and then as well as just like, just physical and mental things too. I try to meditate at least once a day. Um, and meditation's been a game changer. It's another thing that I picked up during COVID because I was like, it was just such a, yeah, I was like, I got to find something to like turn off, like mentally. Those are definitely some key things that I try to focus on. Is every day I try to do something physical. Every day I try to do something fun. Every day I try to laugh. Every day I try to think. Every day I try to contribute, and I think that's a full day.
Yeah. It's an interesting path you have, and I wonder what's next for you. How do you want to bring this further this year?
That's a great question. For this year, I think the focus is just optimizing kind of the existing clinics that we have and not really any like plans for growth. I think there's still a little bit of like uncertainty about the macro environment too. So, I think if we can kind of clean some of that up, especially in Austin, we've had a lot of challenges lately because, this is like 2025 was the first year where more people moved out of the city than moved into the city. And as a de novo based business, we really rely on people that are new to the market, right? Last year was a real challenge, and we just want to make sure that we're kind of keeping our cards close and seeing what materializes. But I think it's an opportunity. I think it's a chance to refine the little things, polish up, our communication skills across the board, polish up our systems, polish up our processes, and really get financially sound and take it from there. And if we're able to figure those things out, then the world's our oyster. I think there's a lot of opportunity that's going to be in the market coming forward. But I think right now we just want to, what's the word?
So there is a
Focus.
possibility in the future to probably build up a certain number of locations and places you serve, and then maybe cash out on it.
Yeah, I mean that was ultimately the goal, right? Like, and in my mind, like the PE conversation comes up quite often, and I'm open to it, but in a right kind of a setting, right, where it's like, hey, whoever we bring on, they kind of understand what we're doing, what our values are, how we want patient care to run, and how they can support like growth, utilizing some of those principles, right? And obviously, I'd still love to be a part of it going forward. So I wouldn't necessarily remove myself from the equation is the
Hmm.
best way to put it. But yeah, I mean, that's a conversation that we have pretty often. And the other thing is like we don't have a ton of debt on the business. We kind of grew it with cash flow. Recently we've been taking on some debt with these newer practices, and so, we don't really have anyone to answer to, and that's a hard thing to give up. It's a really hard thing to give up.
Yeah, yeah, you get used to that very easy.
Yeah, right, right.
I know,
It,
and
it's
plus,
a it's a double-edged sword though, right? Because
right,
you're responsible for everything, and so
exactly. And the other thing is that once you infuse capital from those private equity firms or venture capitals or any other thing, not only that you give up, maybe you give up control of your business, but it also becomes a more of a business, right, rather than a practice.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And most people, I think they're confused about what that means. And obviously, we all have to make money somehow. But I think the term of, in at least in medical field, the term of being in a practice for us, the practitioner, means sometimes more than just being in a business and making money, because the final purpose is to take care of the patient.
exactly.
So another thing would be, you were exposed in your family with investments in real estate. Obviously, your parents owned a motel and you grew up in that kind of environment. Real estate seems to be, some sort of an influencer, I would say, in your mindset later on. How do you see you as a doctor who wants to invest your money, wants to grow your money, and maybe become financially independent at some point, and kind of, give this legacy to your family.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the real estate role in this?
Yeah, I mean, with our dental offices, we don't own the real estate. They're all leases. So, obviously, I do that on the side. I actually just bought a motel out in Tyler, Texas, with my sister, and so just because like she needed something to do, and I'm like, all right, great, it's a great passive investment for me. It's a family thing, right? We already know how this works. So,
Right. Yeah, that's why I'm asking, because I mean,
yeah,
you have plenty of experience with this.
yeah. So that's definitely like the next step is to like and the other thing is like to help your people out, kind of get on their feet, do the things they need to do. And I think there's a lot of virtue and a lot of values in that, right? So
Yeah.
um so there's that. I've actually talked to some brokers out in Costa Rica about potentially doing some rental properties out there as well. So I kind of have some eggs in different baskets on the real estate front too. I'm my place right now that we live in. I'm planning on moving soon and renting it out and buying a new place too. So then that'll become another rental home. So it's all kind of gradual, but in my mind, like the dental thing has been a big focus for so long, and like now it's like the question you ask, like, well, what's next? It's a scary question, to be honest with you, because you have all these big crazy plans, and at some point, like, I need to kind of sit down and prioritize. Okay, well, what is it that I want to accomplish within the next year, the next 3 years, the next 5 years, just like I was telling you earlier on. And so I think I've like gotten to that point now where it's the next thing that I want to optimize for.
I see. So let me end with the classic question. I would say for me is, with the experience and the wisdom and the failures that you encountered in your life and professionally so far, if you would look back to yourself when you started this whole thing, what kind of advice would you give to yourself?
Um, be patient. I think that's probably the biggest thing. It's not my personality to be patient, right? So it helps, it helps in a lot of ways, right? Like the sense of urgency is not necessarily a bad thing, but I think like there's a lot of times where if I was just like willing to wait a little bit longer and just be patient, I think things would have shaken out, or like I would have like been exposed to more information and I could have made a better decision, right? So I think patience was is definitely like a big learning lesson for me.
Interesting. Yeah, most people are impatient in our field. I agree with that. And, coming to the stage in my life I'm at, I realize the same thing, that looking back, some things are better to wait. And you don't know that until you get to the other side at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's
Exactly.
some things that, need to be there longer than you think for a reason. So retrospectively, I would say your advice is perfect. Like, you need to be patient in your life. And, it's hard. It's a hard thing to accomplish for a young professional, because we all want things yesterday done. But it's a learned skill. It's a learned skill that comes from experience and from dealing with setbacks, most
Oh
of it.
yeah. And I think I'd add to that like enjoying your wins and celebrating them too. I think that's one of the things that like I forget to do pretty religiously, and I think that comes with being patient, staying in the moment, right? If you're able to do those things, you're able to reflect on the fact that like, hey, like look at how much you've done, look how far you've come. Like give yourself a
Yeah.
pat on the back. It's okay to do that.
Yeah. And be humble and
Yeah.
grateful for what
Yeah,
you
yeah, of
accomplished.
course.
Yeah,
Yes.
I
Yes.
appreciate it.
Most of my meditations are gratitude for sure.
Right. How often do you meditate?
And like I said, once a day, I try to do about 20 minutes, usually guided. Like I've tried doing it without some form of guided, and immediately the mind
Yeah.
goes somewhere else, I always tell
Yeah.
people who are not meditators, I'm like, the analogy for exercise is what I like to use. So, like right now we're sitting and that's at rest. That's what physical at rest looks like versus like, what does exercise look like for us? We start running, moving, jumping jacks, whatever, right? The mind is the opposite. At rest, your mind is just going a mile a minute, right? So if you want to
Yeah.
exercise your mind, you got to learn to like turn it off, stop it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very important. There are a lot of apps out there that can help with that. And I think there are different systems for meditation. And most people get a little bit bored, I would say, in the beginning when they start doing that because they don't see the value or they don't, like you said, they're impatient with their results. But I think the more you do it, the more you realize that you get to a mind calm down that is priceless.
Yeah.
Um, and there are people out there that, can do this like very intensively, I would say every day, and they have such a good recovery from it after a normal session of meditation. I would
Yeah.
definitely recommend that. Dr. Patel, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope your practice grows continuously from now on. How can
Thank
people get in touch with you, learn more about your business skills and your practice?
Yeah, I mean, you can call me, text me, email me. If you want me to share my number, it's fine.
Yeah, whatever you think it's
Yeah, yeah.
appropriate.
My cell phone number is 620-870-4691. Happy to help. Just reach out. Let me know what I can do for you. And email address is Dr. Devish Patel. So just Dr. Devish Patel at enameldentistry.com.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of
And good
course.
luck.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.
How are you, Dr.
Are
Patel?
you a busy medical professional striving to excel in life and work? Stellar Success Podcast brings you the habits and insights of top leaders in medicine and beyond. Discover strategies for balance, growth, and fulfillment in every episode. Follow us on Instagram at Stellar Success Podcast for daily inspiration. Start your journey to success today. Subscribe to the YouTube channel now.
That's a wrap on Stellar Success, Leveling Up for Medical Pros with Dr. Tudor Francu. Interested in joining us? Go to stellarsuccesspodcast.com/guest to apply. Stay stellar and level up.